32 years ago, on a snowy winter night in the small town of Ipswich, Massachusetts, a 5-year-old boy vanished right in his backyard, just minutes after his laughter could still be heard echoing through the snow. No screams, no signs of a struggle, just absolute silence. Police and neighbors rushed to search, but every clue melted away as if the boy had never existed. When the snow stopped falling, the entire town was haunted by an invisible fear. The fear that the perpetrator might be the very person who still greeted them every morning. Many years passed, and the cold case 92-1212 file gathered dust in storage, forgotten among thousands of other missing persons cases. But then, 3 decades later, a chance discovery while dismantling an old doghouse reignited a nightmare thought to be dormant. Fragments of red fabric, small bones, and lime-scented soil uncovered a secret meticulously hidden for over 30 years. When Massachusetts State Police returned to the old house, they found not just evidence, they found a buried story, betrayal, lies, and a promise never kept. What seemed like a simple case gradually became a labyrinth of suspicion, where each opened file page sent shivers down spines. Before diving into this chilling story, the disappearance that haunted an entire generation of Massachusetts residents, let us know where you're watching from. And if you love cold cases solved by justice and science, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to join us in unraveling secrets buried by time. The coastal town of Ipswich, Massachusetts, was immersed in the first winter of 1992. Snow fell thickly, blanketing the small streets in white, with salty ocean air mingling in the biting cold wind. Weathered wooden houses leaned under golden lamplight, smoke rising hazy from chimneys into the fog. In the house at 27 Ashmere Road, the Whitmore family gathered by the fireplace. David, the father who worked at the shipyard, was tinkering with an old radio. Eleanor, the elementary school teacher, was folding clothes by the window, and Jamie, the 5-year-old boy, eagerly watched the first snow of the season cover the backyard. Beyond the fence, the neighbor's dog Cooper barked loudly, tail wagging non-stop. Jamie asked his mom to bring some breadcrumbs out for Cooper, and Eleanor smiled, reminding him to come right back in after just a few minutes because it was cold. The wooden door opened, wind rushing into the kitchen, and the small figure of the boy faded into the swirling white snow. The porch light reflected off the thin layer of ice, leaving tiny footprints heading toward the snow-covered fence. 10 minutes passed, and Eleanor called for her son. No answer. She stepped out onto the porch, seeing only wind and the cracking of branches. David turned off the radio, and joined his wife, shining a flashlight around the yard. The small footprints had mostly been erased, with just faint streaks, stopping right at the fence. They circled to the front, scoured the garden, calling their son's name hoarsely into the frigid air. No response, no lights, just the wind whistling over the roof. Panic rose as the clock ticked past 9 p.m. Snow thickening, wind strengthening, and narrowing visibility. Eleanor rushed through the house, checking every room, under every bed, in every closet, then burst into tears. David dashed outside, shining his flashlight along the narrow path leading to the riverbank, but saw only vast white expanses. Overwhelming panic hit, as everywhere felt empty. The two looked at each other in absolute terror, wind lashing the doorframe. Eleanor tremblingly picked up the phone, her hands numb with cold. She dialed emergency services, her voice breaking as she reported that her 5-year-old son had vanished into the first snowstorm night in Ipswich. The sound of patrol cars echoed through the snow-covered small street. Flashing red lights reflected off the ice, sweeping over the dark wooden houses with their doors shut tight. Just minutes after Eleanor's call, Ipswich police arrived, the first 2 officers stepping out of the car, their voices cutting through the wind. "Step back inside, don't disturb anything in the yard." David pointed toward the fence where the small footprints had vanished. Eleanor stood trembling on the porch, wrapped tightly in a scarf, her eyes vacant. An ambulance pulled up, rescue workers scanning the area with high-powered flashlights, while police set up tape around the property. Snow fell heavier, each gust of wind whipping up thousands of white flakes, erasing every trace just glimpsed. In the dim yellow light, The Whitmore backyard became a maze of overlapping footprints. One officer noted, children's prints, some drag marks, unclear what they are. They called in the K-9 support team from Salem. Less than half an hour later, the specialized van carrying 2 working dogs pulled up in front of the house. The smell of gasoline mixed with melting snow and kerosene lamp smoke created a thick, frigid atmosphere. The local police chief, Mr. Harris, ordered a sweep of the entire area within a 1-mile radius. Neighbors cracked their doors open, lights flickering on sporadically across the neighborhood. A middle-aged man in a heavy coat crossed over, carrying 2 large floodlights. "I'm Albert Crane, neighbor from across the way," he said, his voice hoarse from the cold. "Let me help light up the woods out back." No one objected. 2 officers nodded, taking the lights. Albert lingered, asking if they needed extra searchers, then went back home for spare batteries. Tall and lanky, he moved slowly through the snow, his flashlight casting cold white light on the Whitmore house wall. The K-9 team got to work. The 2 dogs sniffed around the porch, then headed straight for the north fence. One stopped, barking loudly, nose buried in snow, nearly 2 feet deep. Under the lights, officers spotted a few small footprints mixed with faint drag marks, as if something had been pulled along. But only for a short stretch. Everything ended at the forest edge, where wind had scattered the fine snow. Police used probes, shining lights deep into the woods, seeing only dense tree canopies and howling gusts. No blood, no clothing, no sounds beyond the dogs' panting breaths and human exhales blending into the snowfall. By midnight, reinforcements from the neighboring town arrived to assist. They divided the areas. The first group combed along the Ipswich river bank, the second checked abandoned houses, the third swept the woods. Chief Harris issued constant orders over the radio, his voice gravelly. No one stopped searching until ordered. Eleanor stood by the window, watching the flashlight bearers move like tiny specks of light amid the darkness. Each time a beam swept through the pine forest, she held her breath. David paced the front yard, snow up to his ankles, his face etched with despair. By 1 a.m., temperatures dropped to 10 below zero, snow fell in thick sheets, visibility down to a few feet. Rescue teams grew weary, breaths turning to white vapor. The K-9s lost the scent, amid the snow smell and cold, no longer reacting clearly. Police halted the wood sweep, regrouping at the Whitmore property to discuss alternatives. They set up a tent, pulling out maps and marking searched areas. Harris questioned Albert about the local terrain. He described the woods leading to a wild meadow and a small river, half frozen over. Notes were added to the map, but weather made further access impossible for now. In the kitchen, Eleanor sat motionless, clutching her son's sweater. Flashes from outside lit up through the glass, each burst revealing her red-rimmed eyes. David came in, wrapping a blanket around his wife, then went back out to talk to police. He wanted to join the search teams, but was asked to stay and provide details. Harris said gently, "We'll search until dawn." At 3 a.m., snow had buried the first footprints. Patrol car headlights pierced the foggy haze, illuminating blurred figures moving sluggishly. The quiet neighborhood was eerily still, save for the rescue radio reporting empty zones. A young officer jotted quickly in his notebook. K-9 lost trail at North Woods Edge. No evidence. Resume at daylight. As the night shift ended, the sky began turning silvery gray. Roads were slick, wind still whistling through trees. Dog barks, echoing faintly in the distance. Police packed gear, promising to return at dawn. Eleanor gazed out where the last police car lights vanished around the bend, leaving only endless cold white. In the small house, the wall clock showed past 4 a.m. The whole town seemed to hold its breath in silence, awaiting whatever might be found with the new day. A gray dawn settled over Ipswich town as snow flurried lightly. The entire Ashmere Road neighborhood was cordoned off, police cars parked along both sides, red lights flashing off the vast white ice. By early morning, Massachusetts State Police had arrived for support. Chief Harris directed the scene, joined by 2 state agents resweeping the full area around the Whitmore house. Eleanor and David sat exhausted in the living room after the long night. On the table, cold coffee mugs and Jamie's small sweater. Outside, radio chatter, dog barks, and voices calling to clear snow rang out non-stop. Rescue teams launched a large-scale search. A helicopter from Boston flew in, scanning infrared over the North Woods. On the ground, dozens of rescuers in reflective gear moved in lines, flashlights glinting. Local news channel, WGBH, broadcast live footage of the search, reporting on the mysterious disappearance of a 5-year-old boy in Ipswich. Neighborhood residents peered from behind windows, silently watching. At the scene, the forensics team began collecting samples around the backyard fence. They found small items, a curved plastic piece, a dark button, a wet scrap of paper, all carefully sealed. Overnight snow had faded the footprints almost completely. The canines sniffed around the porch, then toward the woods, but detected no new scents. All traces stopped at the forest edge, battered by wind and deep drifts. Harris set up a temporary command center in a tent on the front lawn. On the spread-out map, the search area was divided into 3 rings, 1 mile around the Whitmore house, the North Woods, and the Ipswich River bank. Rescue groups marked swept zones in red pen, leaving a few dense thickets for later checks. A Boston agent assessed kidnapping as the highest likelihood, given no signs of drowning or accidents nearby. Harris noted the hypothesis, ordering expansion to roads toward Salem and nearby industrial areas. By noon, snow paused but wind stayed biting. One rescue group dug at the wood's edge, uncovering a sunken dirt streak suspected as a slide mark, but it turned out to be solid ice. Another combed the riverbank, the water surface frozen in patches, no cracks. The helicopter swept again, but results remained empty. Inside, a police psychologist talked with Eleanor, guiding her breathing and urging rest. David repeatedly asked to help outside but was told to stay. He stood staring out the window at flashlight beams and figures weaving through the white snow, his heart filled with despair. Albert Crane, the next-door neighbor, brought 2 more floodlights to illuminate the woods. He cooperated, providing a sketch of his own backyard. When asked about Cooper the dog, he only said it had barked fiercely that night, but for no clear reason. The statement was recorded, nothing suspicious. By afternoon, forensics finished collecting around the house. They noted minor scratches on the wooden fence, and a dark round streak in the yard corner. Nature undetermined. Samples were sealed and sent to the state lab. Harris ordered the scene preserved until results came. As dusk fell, police car lights continued illuminating the street. Remaining residents in the area were asked to stay indoors, avoiding the scene. Police and rescuers set up guard tents, preparing for the night shift. From afar, the helicopter's final whir faded from the overcast sky. Evening news replayed footage of the snow-blanketed neighborhood with the siren. Day 2 in the search for boy Jamie Whitmore, no results. Eleanor sat by the fireplace, firelight flickering on her gaunt face. David closed the window against the whistling wind on the porch, and the steady police radio. No new findings. Continue tomorrow morning. Outside, snow fell again, thicker over the Whitmore yard. The whole neighborhood sank into silence, save for the flashing police lights reflecting off the white expanse, signaling another long night approaching with no one knowing where Jamie was. On the morning of the 3rd day since Jamie went missing, snow still blanketed Ashmere Road thickly. Police cars lined the street, the Whitmore house area cordoned off with police tape. The search had now officially turned into a criminal investigation. In the living room, Sheriff Harris, along with 2 Massachusetts state investigators, interrogated the victim's parents. Eleanor huddled by the fireplace, recounting every minute of that evening. Jamie went out to the backyard to bring treats for the neighbor's dog, and then he didn't come back. David, the boy's father, said he went to the convenience store to buy radio batteries, but the store's camera was out due to the snow, and no one could verify his statement. The first note in the file, alibi unverified. The police separated the couple for individual questioning. Eleanor cooperated, insisting her husband couldn't have harmed their son. David appeared tired and irritated at the repeated questions. He stated he was only gone from the house for 10 minutes, but no one had witnessed it. Harris marked David's name on the persons of interest list. Outside, the forensics team examined the house, floors, carpets, walls, windows, no blood stains or drag marks detected. Everything was neat, with no signs of violence or struggle. At noon, the police went to the neighbors' houses for statements. Albert Crane opened the door calmly, saying he only learned about it when he heard the police cars. Asked about the night of the disappearance, he said he was home alone, watching TV and going to bed early. Regarding his dog Cooper, he said it barked because of the snow and noises in the yard. The report noted, no suspicious signs. However, one investigator jotted in the margin, statement too smooth. The police continued questioning other neighbors. A woman living nearby said she saw headlights from a strange car speeding by around 9 o'clock. Another man heard the dog barking fiercely and a metallic clank. These scattered bits of information weren't enough to piece together the picture. The investigative team split into two directions. Hypothesis 1. Jamie was abducted by a stranger, possibly from a white van. Hypothesis 2. The incident involved someone from the neighborhood, someone who knew the boy's habits well. At the Ipswich police station, Harris met with the investigative team. He ordered a review of vehicle license plates circulating that night, and a check of sex offender records within a 20-mile radius. No one living on Ashmere fit that profile, but there was a report of a white van passing through the area at the time of the disappearance. The abduction direction was prioritized, but Harris still directed undercover surveillance on David and those close to him. Soil samples, hair and fabric fibers collected around the fence were sent to the state lab for analysis. In the evening, the snow stopped falling, but the cold seeped deeper. The small coffee shop at the end of the street was packed, everyone gossiping. Rumors spread quickly. Some said the police suspected the father, others claimed there was a shadowy figure around the woods that night. The evening TV news repeated the phrase not ruling out involvement by family members. David sat silently in front of the screen, his face rigid. Eleanor turned away, tears streaming down. They had gone from being the victim's family to the center of suspicion for the entire town. On the fourth day, Harris brought back the initial results. The house showed no signs of a crime, no evidence of violence. Soil samples around the fence contained only ordinary snow mud, no foreign DNA found yet. Small items, a piece of plastic and a shirt button would be tested further at the state lab. Harris advised the couple to rest, but not to leave town until further notice. That evening, the police held a community meeting at the local church. Harris reassured residents that the investigation was ongoing and called for everyone's cooperation. However, fear spread throughout Ipswich. Children were forbidden from going outside after dusk, fences were reinforced, outdoor lights left on all night. Everyone eyed each other warily. One child's disappearance had made this small coastal town colder and more uneasy than ever. Ipswich was no longer as peaceful as before, and in every resident's heart, the only question remained unanswered. Where had Jamie gone, and who had taken the boy away into that snowy night? A week after Jamie went missing, the snow had stopped falling, but the cold air still hung over the entire town of Ipswich. The cordon around the Whitmore house remained in place. At police headquarters, exhaustion permeated the atmosphere. Reports piled up, dozens of statements but nothing clear. As every hypothesis led to a dead end, a new tip emerged. A newspaper delivery person said they had seen a white van parked near the woods behind Ashmere Road on the night of the disappearance. The police immediately verified it. Using traffic cameras at the edge of town, they spotted a blurry image of an old Ford Econoline, license plate unclear, passing through the area at 9:17 p.m. right when Eleanor reported her son going out to the yard. The information was forwarded to the state, and just 2 days later, the investigative team identified the van as belonging to Raymond Cole, a 34-year-old electrician living in Wenham. a town about 10 miles from Ipswich. Cole had no serious criminal record, just a few traffic violations. However, he had worked briefly for the local utility company, giving him access to the Ashmere neighborhood when repairing power lines. In an emergency meeting that night, Sheriff Harris decided to confront Cole the next morning. When the police knocked, Cole seemed surprised but cooperative. His small house at the end of Pine Street was cluttered with tools, wires, and fuse boxes. He stated that on the night of December 12th, he was on his way home after fixing lights for a restaurant near Ipswich. The van passed through Ashmere because it was a shortcut. "I didn't know about any disappearance," he said. Still, Harris noticed grease on his hands and fresh scratches. They requested permission to search the van parked in front of the house. Inside the van, the smell of metal and gasoline was overpowering. The officers noted old tools, a heavy coat, a wool blanket, and a canvas bag for parts. Under the back seat, they found a small piece of red fabric, stained with dirt and fibers of hair. The forensics team immediately seized it. Eleanor had stated Jamie was wearing a red coat the night he disappeared, a detail that stunned everyone. The police impounded the van and detained Cole for questioning. News leaked out within hours, and local media quickly ran the headline, "Police find new evidence in white van." At the station, the interrogation lasted 4 hours. Cole stayed calm, saying he knew nothing about the fabric, that it might be a tear from work clothes. He insisted he'd never been to the Whitmore house, and didn't know anyone in the neighborhood. When asked about the scratches on his hands, he said they were from working with wires. With no direct evidence to charge him, Harris had to release him, but kept him under surveillance. Meanwhile, the samples from the van were sent to the state lab in Danvers. The whole town waited anxiously for results. 3 days later, the report arrived. The red fabric didn't match Jamie's coat. The hair fibers also weren't the boy's, they were animal hair, likely from a dog. All hopes collapsed. The evening news carried the cold headline, "No link between white van and Jamie Whitmore disappearance." Disappointment spread through the investigative room. In the days that followed, Harris had them re-canvass every witness who mentioned the van, but they all said they heard it secondhand, rather than seeing it themselves. During the wrap-up meeting, a young officer whispered, "Maybe we went in the wrong direction from the start." Outside, the media didn't let up. Newspapers ran articles questioning the local police's competence. Radio talk shows debated harshly, why, after more than a week, was there still no trace? Some reporters started digging into Jamie's parents' personal lives, reviving the family involvement hypothesis. In diners, people whispered that Harris had let the case slip away. At the Whitmore house, exhaustion and despair grew heavier. Eleanor rarely left the bedroom, while David barely spoke to anyone. Every time they heard a car pass by, they'd look out the window as if waiting for something. But the street remained cold, only the wind sweeping through the white fences. A week after the white van investigation direction collapsed, Harris had to hold a press conference. He stood before dozens of microphones, snowflakes dusting his shoulders. His voice was low and weary. "We've examined all the evidence. There's no connection between the vehicle and the disappearance. The investigation continues." Behind him, Jamie's photo in a gold frame hung in front of Town Hall. Many people teared up, but faith in finding the boy was fading. That evening, Harris returned to his office, staring at the neighborhood map, plastered with red dots and notes. He knew every direction had hit a wall. The scant clues melted away with the snow, and the Jamie Whitmore case gradually became Ipswich's haunting obsession. As cold wind whistled through the window panes, he added one final line to the report. "Current investigation direction misguided. Need to re-interview all witnesses." In January 1993, snow began melting on the rooftops in Ipswich, revealing gray mud streaks and broken branches. At the same time, the investigation into Jamie Whitmore's disappearance officially stalled. After more than 3 weeks of combing through dozens of witnesses and countless samples tested, the police found no results substantial enough to open a new direction. The red fabric, the white van, every trace that had once sparked hope, led to a dead end. In the small meeting room at the Ipswich Police Department, Sheriff Harris stood before a bulletin board, crammed with crime scene photos, maps, site diagrams, red pins everywhere, his gaze weary. "We've done all we can," he said quietly, his voice dropping. "No more evidence." The Essex County Prosecutor's Office requested a temporary file be prepared and sent to the state level. The police classified the case under missing person cause undetermined. A new case number was created, Cold Case 92-12-12, a nearly 200-page file, including forensics reports, area maps, witness transcripts, and scene photos, was bound with steel clips. Harris looked at the number in silence, then signed it. For him it was the first failure in over 20 years on the job. News of the suspension of the investigation was announced briefly on local TV. The ticker read, "No new developments in Jamie Whitmore case." A few reporters tried to interview Harris, but he declined comment. As the cameras left, Ashmere Road sank back into silence. The cordons were removed, the command tent dismantled, leaving only tire tracks etched in the ice. Residents breathed a sigh of relief that the prolonged search was over, but it carried a sense of emptiness, as if something had never been resolved. The Whitmore house felt hollow. Eleanor rarely went out, living quietly in her son's room. Every morning, she folded the red coat the police returned, and placed it on the chair like a ritual. David tried returning to the shipyard, but the stares around him suffocated him. Suspicion never fully faded, even though the police insisted there was no evidence to charge anyone. Within months, the couple barely spoke. By spring, David left town, leaving a short note, "I can't take it anymore." Eleanor stayed, living in the half-lit half-dark house with her son's smiling photo above the fireplace. The Massachusetts State Police took custody of the entire file, transferring it to the Cold Case Archives in Salem. A small label was affixed to the spine, 92-12-12, Whitmore, Jamie, Ipswich, Massachusetts, December 12, 1992. There it joined hundreds of other files in long rows, each an unfinished story. In the handover log, Harris noted, "No additional leads found. Recommend review if DNA technology advances." That brief line was the last fragile promise for the child who vanished into the snowy night. Time passed, and Jamie's story faded. That summer, new kids moving to the neighborhood no longer knew the boy's name. The photo on the supermarket bulletin board blurred under the sun, tape peeling in the wind. Newspapers stopped mentioning it. TV moved on to other news. Ipswich residents returned to daily life, only occasionally. When the first snow of the season fell, someone remembering the night police cars filled the small street, and the dogs' barks echoed in the cold wind. Eleanor still lived in that house. Every time snow covered the backyard, she'd gaze out at the fence where her son's footprints had once stopped. Across the way, Albert Crane's house stayed shuttered, chimney smoke rising steadily each morning. No one paid attention to the quiet neighbor anymore. For them, the Jamie Whitmore case was now just a sad memory, a story without an ending, buried in a file numbered 92-12-12, sleeping in the cold storage vaults of the Massachusetts State Police. As the years passed, the old newspapers about the Jamie Whitmore case turned yellowed. In the Massachusetts State Police archives, the file marked Cold Case 92-12-12 lay quietly in a metal cabinet drawer, next to hundreds of other unsolved cases. Each year, someone new was assigned to review those old files, and the Jamie case, though it had faded into oblivion for the people of Ipswich, was occasionally pulled out, reread, and silently closed again. The first time was in 1997. Lieutenant Robert Malloy, then a young investigator, was tasked with reviewing unidentified missing persons cases from the previous decade. He read through nearly 200 pages of the file. Eleanor's statement, the forensic report, photos of the snow-covered scene. Nothing jumped out. Malloy added a line to the summary log. Lacking physical evidence, advanced DNA technology needed to verify remaining exhibits. He carefully resealed the file and returned it to the archives. At that time, DNA forensics was still rudimentary, and comparing samples in old cases was nearly impossible. By 2004, when Massachusetts established a dedicated cold case unit, File 92-1212 came up again. The second investigator, a female officer named Linda Rourke, spent weeks rereading every report. She noted the record of the dark circular stain in the yard corner and the small scratch on the fence. A feeling that something had been overlooked prompted her to request a re-examination of the area around the Whitmore house, now sold to someone else. However, a search warrant was only approved with new evidence, something the Jamie file couldn't provide. Rourke had no choice but to add to the internal report, recommend checking the neighbor's property, Albert Crane's house, dog kennel area not thoroughly searched. But that suggestion didn't go beyond a single note. At the time, Albert Crane still lived at the old address, and the police had no legal reason to return. In December 2006, Eleanor Whitmore passed away in the local hospital from heart disease. With no close relatives, her funeral was held modestly at the Ipswich church. Only a few neighbors attended, including Mr. Crane, his hair now gray, his frame gaunt, silently placing a white flower on the casket. As night fell, the first snow of the season fell again on the old fence, blanketing the garden where Jamie's footprints had once stopped. After Eleanor's death, the house stood empty for nearly a year before being sold to a young couple who only knew the old story in passing, like a local legend. In 2011, the file was opened for the third time. By then, forensic technology had advanced significantly. State labs were beginning to test mitochondrial DNA methods, allowing analysis of heavily degraded samples. The new investigative team, led by young detective Marcus Hale, retrieved the original fiber and soil samples from the file. The results: the DNA in the fibers was too weak to identify. The soil contained only natural microorganisms. Hale noted, no human DNA at the scene. However, while rereading the file, he came across Linda Rourke's faint 2004 note, soil layer under Crane's dog kennel never checked. Hale grew curious. He pulled up the scene photos, clearly showing the Crane yard corner behind the fence, where a small wooden kennel stood. But when comparing current property maps, the land had been transferred, and the new owner refused entry, without a warrant. Like his predecessors, Hale had to shelve it. His end of 2012 report stated succinctly, insufficient grounds for search warrant, at 29 Ashmere, Crane. File to remain archived. That line closed the third file opening. When Hale left the unit the following year, the Jamie Whitmore case sank back into oblivion. Over those more than 2 decades, Ipswich changed a lot. The Ashmere neighborhood was now shaded by trees, new houses rising in place of old wooden ones. Only Mr. Crane's house remained unchanged, painted weathered gray, the white fence peeling, the dog kennel still standing there, its roof slanted, boards rotted. New residents who moved in knew little of the 1992 missing child story. Only the older folks, whenever they saw Mr. Crane silently walking his dog in the afternoons, would whisper Jamie's name. But time had faded all suspicions into vagueness. In the cold case archives, File 92-1212 was moved to another cabinet, labeled awaiting next generation forensic technology. Amid the thick stacks of files, it was just one of hundreds unsolved. However, the small note Crane's dog kennel was still there, neatly folded in the binder. No one knew that that very line, overlooked for more than 20 years, would later become the key to awakening a case that seemed destined to sleep forever under the thick dust of time. 32 years after Jamie Whitmore's disappearance, the house at 29 Ashmere Road, where Albert Crane once lived, changed hands again. After Mr. Crane's death in 2022, the rundown house was put up for sale. In early 2024, Mark and Kylie Dawson, a young couple from Salem, moved in. They loved the quiet neighborhood, unaware it was once tied to an unsolved case. In the backyard, a rotted wooden dog kennel still sat by the fence. Kylie told her husband to tear it down to plant flowers. Mark agreed, seeing it as a small task in the home renovation. One morning in March, under a rare burst of sunshine after a long winter, Mark brought out a shovel and hammer to dismantle the kennel. Broken boards fell away, revealing an unusually compacted layer of dark soil beneath. As he dug deeper, the shovel hit something hard, making a dry clank. Mark knelt to brush away the dirt, and picked up a worn yellow toy wheel from a child's wagon. Nearby, he found a tattered piece of red fabric, and a small ivory white bone fragment. The air suddenly thickened. Kylie froze, stepping back a few paces, her face paling. The two looked at each other. Then Mark set down the shovel, and pulled out his phone to call 911. Less than 10 minutes later, 2 police cars arrived. The responding officer immediately cordoned off the area, asking the couple to leave the yard. The report went to Dispatch Central, and Detective Claire Whitman, Ipswich's new police chief, headed out right away. She had once been part of the cold case unit, familiar with old missing persons files. When she heard Ashmere Road and human bone discovery, she recalled file 92-1212 from memory, the Jamie Whitmore case. That afternoon, the forensics team arrived at the scene. The yard was tented over, lights illuminating every patch of soil. They excavated methodically, the red fabric scrap, the toy wheel, 2 bone fragments, and a metal button. At the bottom was a layer of white lime, showing signs of odor treatment. One technician whispered, "It's small, could be a child." Whitman stood still, her eyes fixed on the weathered wooden fence. Beyond it had once been the Whitmore house. She requested a cross-reference with cold case, file 92-1212, bringing all the documents to the site that same day. That evening, the Dawson house was fully sealed off. Police set up barriers, patrol cars with lights flashing all night. Residents gathered to watch, faces mixing curiosity and fear. Reporters arrived quickly, local TV airing, suspected child bones found at house linked to 1992 disappearance. On screen, the old image of Jamie, his innocent smile against a white snowy backdrop, reappeared after more than 3 decades. In the scene tent, Whitman worked through the night with the forensics team. She examined each piece of evidence closely, noting the arrangement and soil depth. The burial structure showed intent, not random. Samples were sealed and sent to the Boston lab for DNA analysis. All information was kept confidential. Before leaving the scene, Whitman looked around the small yard, thinking to herself, 32 years, and finally we see the first sign. The next morning, headlines blared across the press. Cold Case 92-1212, New Discovery Rocks Ipswich. Residents flocked to the neighborhood, forcing police to set up barricades. An emergency press conference was held at Town Hall. Whitman stated briefly, "We're verifying the victim's identity. The Jamie Whitmore file is officially reopened." With one sentence, she turned the eyes of the entire state of Massachusetts toward Ipswich. That afternoon, in her small office, Whitman opened the dusty old file. The cover title, Jamie Whitmore, Missing Child, December 12, 1992. Amid the yellowed pages, she spotted investigator Linda Rourke's 2004 note, "Soil layer under Crane's dog kennel never checked." She froze. Everything matched perfectly. Location, position, evidence. She quickly jotted in her notebook, "Restart investigation from the dog kennel." That night, in the empty office, Whitman placed Jamie's photo next to the sealed new evidence bag, the dark red fabric scrap. Outside, the first snow of the season fell lightly again, dusting the roof, and the police cars parked out front. After 32 years, Ashmere neighborhood lit up with blue and red lights once more. But this time, in the heavy silence of a Massachusetts winter, people could clearly sense that the truth, at last, was emerging from the cold ground. 2 days after the scene was sealed, the items recovered from 29 Ashmere Road, the bone fragments, red fabric scrap, toy wheel, and soil around the dog kennel, were transported to the Boston Forensic Laboratory. Detective Claire Whitman rode along with the convoy, personally signing the handover log. She knew the results here would be the key to unraveling a mystery spanning more than 3 decades. The lab director, Dr. Evelyn Macaulay, took charge of the case, and assembled a team of DNA, chemistry, and anthropology experts. Given the heavy degradation of the bones, they opted for mitochondrial DNA extraction, a technique specialized for samples decades old. A reference sample was pulled from Jamie Whitmore's parents' DNA data, stored in the cold case database, since the 1990s. While the lab worked, Whitman returned to Ipswich to re-examine the scene. Technicians dug deeper around the kennel, uncovering the white lime layer and chemicals with an ammonia scent. Soil samples were sent for testing, initial results showing the barrier had spread lime to neutralize odors. An intentional act, not an accident. 3 days later, the first report arrived from Boston. Mitochondrial DNA matched 99.98% with Eleanor's sample. The remains were Jamie's. Additional findings confirmed skull fractures with no knife or bullet marks, likely from blunt force trauma. Time of death aligned with the 1992 disappearance night. When she read that line, Whitman sat silent for a long time. After more than 30 years, the identity of the child in the old photo was confirmed, and the truth began rising from the cold soil. That afternoon, Whitman held an emergency meeting with the Essex County prosecutor. The summary report stated clearly, remains identified as Jamie Whitmore, born 1987, head trauma, as cause of death. Lime and odor-neutralizing chemicals indicate calculated concealment. The prosecutor decided to reopen the file under homicide charges. News spread quickly across the state. Massachusetts media broke the story en masse. Body of boy missing for 32 years found. Ipswich was shaken. Residents brought flowers, candles, and stuffed animals to lay in front of the old Whitmore house. On broadcast footage, Jamie's smiling photo in the snow reappeared, but this time under the stark headline, Cold Case 92-12-12, Victim Identified. Whitman stayed silent to the press. She focused on bolstering evidence. The physical report from forensics showed the red fabric matched Jamie's 1992 jacket, exactly, a polyester cotton blend made in Ohio. The yellow toy wheel stamped Play School 1989 was confirmed as the same brand the Whitmore family had bought. Mechanical scratches on the wheel indicated it had been dragged over hard ground, matching the original scene file's note on faint drag marks. Soil analysis further confirmed intentional burial, lime and chloride levels far exceeding natural amounts, proving chemicals had been spread to mask decomposition odors. Dr. Macaulay concluded, amateur method but informed, often seen in those accustomed to handling animal remains. That observation immediately made Whitman think of Albert Crane, the former homeowner, who had kept dogs and worked as a mechanic. She flipped back to Crane's bio in the old file, 48 years old in 1992, lived alone, no prior record, described as calm, quiet. The 2012 review note was still there, insufficient grounds to search 29 Ashmere. Now with the body found right in that backyard, all old hypotheses resurfaced. He lived with it for 30 years, she murmured in the meeting. The investigative team began compiling all seized items from Crane's house after his death: notebooks, tools, material bins and lime buckets. A 1992 notebook had a short entry, "Done, no one knows." When quoted in the log, that line became the first direct link tying him to the scene. The comprehensive report sent to the Essex prosecutor included 4 key conclusions. Mitochondrial DNA matches victim's biological mother, Eleanor Whitmore. Evidence items: fabric, toy matched Jamie's 1992 possessions. Soil around remains contains lime and odor-neutralizing chemicals. Burial behavior shows deliberate concealment. On March 28, 2024, the file was officially recategorized from missing person to homicide. Jamie Whitmore, cold case reopened. The event shocked the entire state. TV channels interviewed old Ipswich residents, most recalling Crane's silent dog walks around the fence years ago. One woman said, "He always looked over at the Whitmore's house, but no one paid attention." Police formed a new task force, re-examining all relationships, even tracking down Crane's former co-workers to ask about his habits and travel history. Whitman visited the scene one last time at the end of March. Spring sun shone on the refilled soil, a chill sea breeze blowing in from afar. She looked through the fence, where 32 years earlier, a 4-year-old boy had vanished in the snow. Now every question about his fate was answered, but the mystery of who buried him was just beginning. Whitman lightly touched the wooden fence, telling her colleagues softly, "This isn't a missing persons case anymore. This is a murder." That evening she sent the day's final report to the prosecutor's office. The bold title, Confirmed Identification, Victim Jamie Whitmore, born 1987, died 1992. Under the notes section, she added a short line, Deliberate concealment behavior. Primary suspect Albert Crane. Outside, the last snowflakes of the season melted on the roof of 29 Ashmere Road. For the first time in 32 years, File 92-1212 was no longer a cold sheet of paper in a metal cabinet. It had come alive, carrying evidence, truth, and the first steps of justice for the child forgotten for half a lifetime. After the identity of the body was confirmed as Jamie Whitmore, Detective Claire Whitman reviewed the list of Ashmere Road residents from 1992. Among the dozens of names, only one stood out: Albert Crane, the former owner of number 29, the house where the body was found. The record showed he was now 80 years old, living in Gloucester, formerly a machine repairman, living alone, no wife or children. That name had appeared in the initial investigation file and been dismissed due to lack of evidence. Now, with all traces leading back to his property, Whitman decided to meet him in person. On April 5, 2024, she drove to Gloucester with her colleague Ryan Torres. The seaside town was windless, old houses painted silver overlooking the harbor. When they knocked on the small apartment door, it took nearly a minute to hear the unlocking sound. Albert Crane appeared, gaunt, silver-haired, eyes blurred with fatigue. Whitman introduced herself, saying they were re-investigating the Ipswich case. Upon hearing Ashmere Road mentioned, he paused briefly, and then said softly, "I don't live there anymore." "Sold it." She replied lightly, "We know, but there's new physical evidence on the land that once belonged to you." In the first conversation, Crane kept his tone calm, occasionally laced with a hint of challenge. He said he had known the Whitmore family only through hellos in passing, denying any contact with Jamie. When asked about the dog Cooper, he said it died a long time ago, but then added that he gave it to a friend in Danvers. Whitman noted the first contradiction. She noticed that every time the child was mentioned, he avoided eye contact. When she showed him the photo of the snow-covered fence, he glanced at it briefly and said, "I heard the screams, went out to help search." But the 1992 records clearly stated, no one saw him participating in the search. The conversation lasted less than an hour. When Whitman mentioned that the body was discovered on your old property, Crane gave a sarcastic smile and replied, "That land isn't mine anymore. Ask the new owner." Then he stood up, signaling he wanted to end the meeting. The feeling in her was clear. This old man knew more than he was saying. Back at headquarters, Whitman had Crane's financial and administrative files reopened. Among the documents, one detail caught her attention: a receipt for 20 kilograms of agricultural lime from a supply store near Ipswich, dated December 19, 1992, just a week after Jamie disappeared. The reason backyard treatment was scribbled hastily, unclear. With this discovery, she reported to the Essex County prosecutor, requesting surveillance and a search warrant for the Gloucester home. 3 days later, Whitman and Torres returned, this time inviting him to the local police station for further work. Crane arrived in an old gray coat, hands trembling slightly, but gaze still alert. In the interrogation room, she placed the forensic results copy in front of him. DNA matches Jamie Whitmore's biological mother. The remains were found on your property, with lime for odor neutralization. Do you want to explain? He looked at the paper, then said slowly, "It's been 30 years, miss. I don't remember. When asked about the lime purchase receipt, he replied, I just wanted to treat the dog kennel smell. Nothing wrong with that. Whitman continued asking about the dog Cooper. He changed his story again. I gave it to an acquaintance in Beverly. Don't remember the name. She noted the second contradiction. When she mentioned that the chemical traces matched the type you bought, he chuckled softly and said, maybe someone else used it. Each answer was brief, but enough to reveal clear defensiveness. As they left the station, Whitman said to Torres, he knows exactly what happened. He's just waiting to see how much evidence we have. They immediately sent the indirect DNA sample obtained from the coffee cup he used during the interrogation to the lab. At the same time, the search warrant was approved. A week later, the investigation team arrived at Crane's apartment with forensics personnel. In an old closet, they found several mechanical tools, a notebook, and a bag of remaining lime that had hardened. In the notebook was a scrawled line, done with it no one knows. The line sent a chill down Whitman's spine. That evening, she compiled a report to send to the Essex County prosecutor. The contents stated, suspect, Albert Crane, 80 years old, residing in Gloucester. Conflicting statements, deliberate evasion. Lime purchase receipt matches the timing and material found at the scene. Signs of intentional concealment of the crime. The final conclusion, recommend considering Albert Crane as the primary suspect in the Jamie Whitmore murder case. Leaving the office late at night, Whitman reopened the old file, looking at Crane's 1992 photo, a tall, gaunt man with deep, inscrutable eyes. 32 years ago, he was the kind neighbor who had helped search for a missing child. Now all the evidence pointed back to him. In the dim yellow office light, Claire added to the investigation notebook, Albert Crane, prime suspect. The truth has been right behind that fence for 32 years. After identifying Albert Crane as the primary suspect, Detective Claire Whitman and the task force began reviewing the entire original 1992 file. She wanted to find every possible connection between Crane and the people around Ashmere Road at the time Jamie Whitmore disappeared. Among the hundreds of pages of reports, one detail overlooked for 3 decades, caught her attention. The name Raymond Cole, the man once investigated for the white van. Whitman read the old transcript carefully. Cole had stated at the time that he was just passing through the neighborhood on the way home from work, but in the December 1992 work invoice, she discovered the customer address clearly listed as 29 Ashmere Road, Albert Crane's house. That meant Cole had worked at the very house where the body was discovered, just a week before Jamie vanished. This convinced Whitman that the old case had missed a crucial link. She presented the report to the Essex County prosecutor and was granted permission to expand the investigation into the relationship between the two men. When checking the records of the old utility company where Cole had worked, she found the 1992 work log. December 11th, 12 lighting maintenance in Ashmere area. Customer, A. Crane. It matched perfectly with the time of the disappearance. Next, Whitman requested the State Technical Unit to retrieve old landline phone data from the Ipswich exchange. After days of searching the archives, they discovered 2 key calls, 2246, from Crane's house to Cole's 3 minutes, and 2320, from Cole back to Crane. 2 minutes. The timing matched the window when Jamie was reported missing. Whitman stood frozen looking at the log. This can't be a coincidence. They communicated right that night. She and colleague Ryan Torres began tracing any remaining physical traces of Cole. He had died in 2009, but his nephew still kept some old items in the basement in Wenham. Among the belongings, the forensics team discovered a cassette tape reel and a small notebook. After cleaning and digitizing, they listened to the 22-minute recording, with dog barking, heavy object impacts, then 2 men's voices speaking softly. No one will know, just bury it deep. I'm not sure the kid is still breathing. The tape ended with a loud metal clatter, and then silence. Hearing the recording, Whitman felt a chill down her spine. The first voice, hoarse, slow, halting, matched Albert Crane's voice from the interrogation. The second voice's pitch corresponded to Raymond Cole's sample from the 1993 file. The subsequent audio analysis report confirmed a 98% match with the two samples. Whitman realized this evidence could turn the entire case around. She presented it to the Essex prosecutor, who immediately ordered an expansion of the investigation toward murder conspiracy. Crane's old financial records showed that in 1992, he received two $500 transfers from Cole, each labeled payment for repairs, with no legitimate invoices. An old neighbor still remembered, "Occasionally I'd see Cole drop by Crane's house in the evening, carrying a toolbox." From the new facts, Whitman reconstructed the hypothesis. On the night of December 12, 1992, Jamie went out to the yard, possibly called over the fence by Crane, or lured to the dog kennel. Cole, working in the area at the time, was the accomplice, possibly helping to handle or dispose of the body. The two calls that night showed they coordinated. As the case went cold, both kept silent. Cole died in 2009, taking the secret with him. Only when the house was sold and excavated did the truth begin to surface. To confirm, Whitman sent the recording to the Federal Voice Analysis Lab in Quantico. The report returned after 2 weeks. Voice match confirmed. Crane and Cole. The conclusion also identified background sounds of a generator and wind characteristic of coastal Massachusetts, consistent with the Ashmere Road area. With this evidence, the prosecutor officially upgraded the file to murder and conspiracy. Jamie Whitmore. News spread immediately. The press reported uniformly, "Jamie Whitmore case, mystery accomplice emerges." Public outrage swept the state. Some who knew Cole said he wasn't a bad guy, adding to the mystery. Whitman declined interviews, only issuing a brief statement, "We are verifying new evidence, and will clarify the full truth." She returned to Gloucester to confront Crane again. When mentioning the recording, he stayed silent for a long time, then said softly, "If I say I don't remember anything, would you believe me?" Whitman replied, "No, because you called Cole that night, and now we have proof." He gave a weary smile, voice hoarse. "He's dead. You won't get anything from him." That statement only convinced Whitman further that he was covering up. Back in Ipswich, she compiled all the facts: electrical repair invoices, call data, voices, and financial evidence. In the internal report she wrote, "Albert Crane and Raymond Cole had a prior work relationship before the case. The two communicated by phone on the exact night Jamie disappeared. The tape recording proves they were both at the scene." Hypothesis: Crane as mastermind, Cole as accomplice in body concealment. The report ended with the line, "Cold Case 92-12-12. The case is no longer a one-man mystery. Two names, one crime hidden for 32 years. That night, Whitman sat alone in the office, looking at the Ipswich map pinned on the wall. Two red thumbtacks, one at Ashmere Road, one in Gloucester, connected by a black string. Between that distance was 32 years of silence. But now, everything was gradually unfolding. In the quiet air, she wrote the final line in the investigation log. Crane and Cole, two strangers who turned out to share one secret under the 1992 snow. After obtaining the voice evidence and financial ties between Albert Crane and Raymond Cole, Detective Claire Whitman knew direct physical evidence was needed to charge him. With the Essex County prosecutor's approval, police began surveilling Crane in Gloucester. Two detectives followed him around the clock. He lived alone, with simple routines: morning coffee run, afternoon harbor visits, evenings back to the rundown apartment. Whitman ordered collection of DNA from his personal trash. One early April morning, the surveillance team retrieved a bag he had just taken out, containing a toothbrush, beer cans, and cigarette butts. The samples were sent to the Boston lab. The results 3 days later left the team silent. Crane's DNA matched the sample found on the red fabric scrap next to Jamie Whitmore's body. Match probability, 99.97%. For the first time there was biological evidence linking him to the 1992 crime scene. Whitman presented the results to the prosecutor. Immediately, a search warrant was approved. At dawn on April 21st, the Special Investigation Team and forensics raided Crane's apartment. He didn't resist, just quietly opened the door, voice hoarse and low. "I knew you'd come." The small apartment was old and dusty. As the forensics team began searching, a series of details chilled Whitman. In a kitchen cabinet, they found a rusty knife, wooden handle rotted, blade stained with dark brown. Under ultraviolet light, the stain fluoresced blood. On a bookshelf, they discovered a black-covered notebook labeled 1992, pages yellowed. One page had a scrawled line, 12/12 too cold. "Didn't plan it, but it happened fast," he said. "Bury deep, lime is enough." The word he sent a shiver through Whitman, clearly referring to Raymond Cole. As the notebook and knife were sealed, she ordered a continued search of the apartment. In the wardrobe, behind a rusty trunk, the forensics team found a box of old cassette tapes. Only one reel labeled faintly, DN92. Whitman personally placed it in an evidence bag and took it to the audio analysis room. After cleaning, the recording opened with dog barking, the sound matching the Cooper breed Crane once owned, followed by wind and footsteps, then two men's voices speaking softly. "Keep it still, don't let it see. It's crying. I can't do it." Then a heavy thud, and silence. A hoarse voice said softly, "It's done." Audio analysis identified the first voice as Crane, the second matching Raymond Cole's pitch. Noise levels indicated outdoor recording, consistent with Ashmere Road conditions. The tape was 18 minutes long, direct audio evidence of the crime. Meanwhile, the forensics team continued excavating under the bed and in old drawers. They found a wooden box containing several old photos, backyard scenes at the Ashmere house, white fence, and the blurry shadow of a child. At the photo's edge, the dog Cooper turning toward the photographer. Whitman picked up the photo, feeling like the past was staring straight at her. That afternoon, the knife analysis results came back. Blood on the blade matched victim Jamie Whitmore's DNA. All the final links fit. Crane had been at the scene, injured the child, then buried the body in the backyard. Whitman held an emergency meeting with the prosecutor. She presented all the evidence: DNA, notebook, bloody knife, audio tape. The prosecutor concluded, "We have sufficient grounds to charge Albert Crane with first-degree murder." The arrest warrant was signed that night. The next morning, police stormed in. Crane sat still in his chair, unresisting, looking out the window as Whitman read the warrant. 30 years I knew it would come," he said softly. "Her voice still calls me every night." He was handcuffed and led out amid reporters' flashes. News spread fast across the state. Jamie Whitmore, case suspect, arrested after 32 years. In Ipswich, residents brought flowers and candles to the front of the Ashmere house. A child missing since 1992 finally had justice. In the end-of-day log, Whitman wrote, "Crane's DNA matches scene evidence. Knife contains victim's blood. Notebook confirms crime date and mentions Cole. Cassette tape records dog sounds and two men's voices." She concluded briefly, 32 years later, the truth finally speaks, through the killer's own voice. After arresting Albert Crane, Detective Claire Whitman's investigative team entered the most critical phase, solidifying the evidence. All specimens, documents, and audio recordings were sent to specialized laboratories for verification of every detail. Any error could undermine the case after more than 30 years. First was the soil sample collected at the scene of 29 Ashmere Road, the location where Jamie Whitmore's body was found. Scientists separated layers of soil nearly 40 centimeters deep, discovering dark streaks containing traces of denatured protein. Mitochondrial DNA analysis yielded results that matched Jamie's genetic sample perfectly. The report stated clearly the presence of the victim's blood in the soil at the burial site. This dispelled any doubts about the possibility of the body being moved after death. Jamie had been murdered and buried right in the Crane family's yard. Next, the audio experts at Quantico completed their analysis of the DEC 92 inches cassette tape. The results matched the original voice samples almost perfectly. The first voice was Albert Crane's, the second belonged to Raymond Cole. The frequencies, pitch, and breathing patterns all aligned with Cole's 1993 voice profile on file. Notably, the background audio captured the whistling wind mixed with faint running water, a signature of the small creek area behind the Crane house, just a few meters from the dog kennel. The conclusion: the recording was made at or near the crime scene, with the presence of two individuals. Whitman listened to the tape again in a sealed room. The frantic barking of dogs, the sound of a heavy object falling, then a horrifying silence. Afterward, a raspy voice said, "It's done." She knew those two words alone were enough to evoke the entire crime that had been covered up for 32 years. In parallel, the Boston Forensics Lab continued decoding Crane's 1992 notebook. Many pages were faded, but under UV light, the hidden writing emerged clearly. 12/12. He brought it over, said it was just a threat. It screamed too loud, I held it. Then blood came out. He told me to shut up, he'd handle the rest. These lines matched the forensics results perfectly: blunt force trauma to the head, no signs of a sharp weapon, consistent with the eye held in the notes. Police determined Crane was the one who directly caused the death, while Cole assisted in disposal and concealment. Details like lime and dog kennel were also referenced in the notebook. Sprinkled lime, no smell, Cooper kept barking. Each sentence became an indirect confession from the killer. At the old crime scene, additional specimens were analyzed. The soil around the burial pit contained chloride levels 15 times higher than normal, proving someone had deliberately treated the body with chemicals. Along with that, red fabric fibers and plastic toy fragments were identified as matching Jamie's belongings from 1992. Every loose piece from the past 3 decades had finally come together. Whitman compiled all the evidence into a report nearly 400 pages long. The conclusion section began with the line, based on DNA, audio, personal diary, and physical evidence results, police determine Albert Crane is the direct perpetrator of Jamie Whitmore's death on the night of December 12, 1992. Raymond Cole played the role of accomplice in disposal and concealment of the crime. Cole died in 2009. On April 28, a special press conference was held at the Massachusetts State Police headquarters. Before dozens of reporters, Whitman announced the investigation results. The images projected on the screen behind her were the key pieces of evidence: the rusted bloody knife, the black notebook, and the cassette tape. "Justice has no statute of limitations," she said, her voice restrained. "Thanks to science and perseverance, we've brought Jamie Whitmore home." News spread across the state. Major TV networks reported, "Cold Case 92, 12/12, officially closed. Victim's neighbor is the killer." Many Ipswich residents burst into tears upon hearing the news. They couldn't believe that the quiet man who had helped in the search was the one who killed the child. At the same time, at the Boston lab, the final blood test on the rusted knife was confirmed. The DNA matched Jamie's sample perfectly. Every small detail in the chain of evidence, blood, soil, audio tape, notebook, all reinforced Crane's role. In the internal summary, Whitman wrote, "Blood in the soil and on the knife, both belong to the victim." The second voice on the tape is Raymond Cole, confirming presence at the scene. Crane's notebook matches the time, description, and actions of the crime. Conclusion: Crane is the primary perpetrator. Cole is the deceased accomplice. After signing the final report, she sat alone in her office, gazing at Jamie's photo pinned to the caseboard. That innocent smile had now become the symbol of a case spanning 3 decades. Outside, light rain fell over Ipswich. Each raindrop tapping the window frame seemed to mark the end of a dark chapter and offer final solace to the forgotten boy's soul after 32 years. After the conclusion report was signed, the Essex County prosecutor officially approved the arrest warrant for Albert Crane on charges of first-degree murder and concealment of a body. On the morning of April 30, 2024, Gloucester Police and Detective Claire Whitman's task force surrounded the Harborside home. When they knocked, the 80-year-old man opened the door slowly, his cloudy eyes calm but steady. Whitman read the warrant. He only said softly, "I knew this day would come." Crane was taken to Massachusetts State Police Headquarters. In the interrogation room, Whitman presented the full evidence: DNA, the bloody knife, the notebook, the cassette tape. He listened, occasionally offering a faint smile. When she asked why he killed Jamie, he was silent for a long time before replying. It wasn't the first time. The room fell silent. "What do you mean?" she asked. He looked straight at her and said quietly, "You should dig deeper. There are things buried much longer." That statement prompted Whitman to immediately request full recording of the interrogation and notify the prosecutor. As questioning continued, he added, "Before Ipswich, I lived in Salem. In 1985, that detail stunned her. Old records had noted Crane left Salem around 1986, due to a machine shop closure. Whitman quickly contacted the Boston FBI office to scour missing persons files from Salem at that time. Just hours later, Special Agent Ethan Ward responded, "There's a case of an 8-year-old girl named Molly Tanner, who went missing while biking in 1985, still unsolved." Whitman realized Crane's implication couldn't be ignored. She immediately requested an expanded search warrant for the Ashmere Road property, where Jamie's body was found. The next morning, the forensics team returned to the scene. Ground-penetrating radar detected a metal signal about 60 centimeters deep in the backyard corner, a few meters from the old dog kennel. When they dug it up, they found a rusted children's bicycle frame, with a broken wheel and faded silver paint, nearly gone. The frame number was partially readable. Cross-referencing with the database yielded results that stunned everyone. It matched the bicycle stolen in the Molly Tanner disappearance. Salem, 1985. Whitman stood frozen, staring at the rusted iron frame. If true, Crane wasn't just Jamie Whitmore's killer, but potentially a serial murderer hidden for 4 decades. The property was immediately resealed. The forensics team continued excavating the yard, expanding to the old shed area. FBI experts were dispatched to coordinate. Special Agent Ward personally surveyed, noting similar burial structure, likely repetitive behavior from someone practiced. Beneath the hard soil, radar detected 2 more small metal points, possibly personal items buried around the same time. Excavation continued, as the FBI scoured the entire 1985 Salem case, seeking victim DNA samples for comparison. In the interrogation room, upon hearing about the bicycle discovery, Crane chuckled hoarsely. "So it's still there. I thought the ground had swallowed it all." When Whitman asked, "Did you ever meet Molly Tanner?" he replied curtly, "That kid liked dogs, just like the boy." The lawyer immediately demanded halting the questioning for health reasons, but those words were enough to escalate the case to federal level. On May 3, the FBI officially joined, partnering with Massachusetts State Police to form a joint task force. The Ashmere property was deemed an expanded crime scene, potentially holding evidence linked to other disappearances. News exploded across national TV: suspect in Jamie Whitmore case, possibly linked to 1985 Salem case. The phrase Salem connection became the headline of every newspaper. Ipswich residents were horrified. They couldn't believe the quiet neighbor, who had watered plants and greeted them every morning, could be the killer of 2 children across 2 decades. Whitman sat silently in front of the TV screen, watching images of the Ashmere house surrounded by FBI vehicles and yellow tape. In the end-of-day internal log, she wrote, "Crane's statement implies another crime in Salem 1985. New excavation uncovers bicycle matching Molly Tanner disappearance. FBI officially joins federal investigation." She ended with a single line: "The Jamie Whitmore case doesn't close, It just opens a darker chapter on Albert Crane. After the FBI confirmed supplemental evidence at the scene, and the 1985 Salem case remained under investigation, the Essex County Prosecutor's Office focused on finalizing the formal indictment against Albert Crane in the Jamie Whitmore murder. Their goal was clear: bring this 3-decade-old case to trial with irrefutable evidence. In the early days of May 2024, District Attorney Martha Klein's office became the hub of the entire investigation. She held non-stop meetings with the legal team and Detective Claire Whitman's investigative unit to compile every piece of evidence. It was divided into 5 main categories: DNA, physical evidence, personal diary, audio recording, and scene evidence, forming a file over 500 pages thick. The most crucial was the DNA evidence. Crane's genetic profile matched perfectly, with traces found on the red fabric scrap and rusted bloody knife, as well as in the soil around Jamie's body. The Boston lab confirmed accuracy up to 99.97%, ruling out any random coincidence. This was the rock-solid foundation for the charges. The second group, physical scene evidence, included the knife, fabric scraps, toys, along with the lime and odor-neutralizing chemicals in the soil. The forensics report concluded: intentional concealment structure, with dispersal materials matching the chemicals Crane purchased at the agricultural supply store on December 19, 1992. That receipt line was deemed paper and ink damning evidence. Next was the 1992 notebook, where Crane explicitly noted the date, 12/12 inches, along with descriptions matching the time and actions of the crime perfectly. The line, "He said bury deep limes enough," became the key to proving coordination with Raymond Cole. Handwriting experts confirmed the script was Crane's, not forged. The Deeple 92 inches cassette tape was the strongest evidence. Crane's and Cole's voices were authenticated by federal investigators, with a 98% match. The background audio aligned with the backyard area of 29 Ashmere Road. The dog barking, falling object sounds, and its done matched the time of death description in the forensics file exactly. "No confession needed," Prosecutor Klein said. "His own voice speaks for him." The final evidence was the soil and lime samples. Analysis from the Massachusetts Environmental Crime Lab proved ammonia and chloride levels in the soil samples are 12 times above natural levels, corresponding to animal body treatment chemicals. Composition matches the lime type Crane bought. This reinforced the argument of deliberate criminal concealment. Faced with the massive body of evidence, Crane's assigned defense counsel attempted a counterattack. They argued the specimens were too old, prone to cross-contamination during storage and excavation. They moved to suppress the DNA and audio results, claiming evidence reliability degraded over time. However, Prosecutor Klein rebutted forcefully. She cited legal standards on continuous chain of custody. All specimens were sealed, documented, and witnessed at every stage. The federal lab confirmed no deviations in procedure. The judge temporarily denied the defense motion, allowing all evidence for trial. Meanwhile, the FBI forwarded a report affirming partial DNA matches from the Salem bicycle to Crane's sample. Though not yet sufficient for charges, this information weighed heavily on his profile. Prosecutors decided to focus first on the Jamie Whitmore case, treating it as the anchor to expand investigations into other victims post-trial. On May 10, 2024, the formal indictment was filed with the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court. Charges: first-degree murder, body disposal, and obstruction of justice. The filing stated clearly, defendant Albert Crane, male 80 years old, is indicted for the intentional murder of 5-year-old Jamie Whitmore on December 12, 1992, followed by concealment of the body and deliberate destruction of evidence. Whitman was present when the file was handed over. She saw the thick binder stamped in red "State for Crane." Everything the team had gathered over the past half-year was now in the hands of justice. In the final meeting before transferring the file, Prosecutor Klein told the investigative team, We've waited 32 years to get here. From now on, every question in the courtroom will be Jamie's voice. Whitman nodded silently. That evening, in the empty office, she wrote in her notebook, "First-degree murder indictment officially filed with court. All evidence admissible, none suppressed. Salem case file separated for federal investigation." Her final line, "After 32 years, justice for Jamie Whitmore has officially entered the courtroom." On June 4, 2024, the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court in Salem officially opened the trial for the case State of Massachusetts v. Albert Crane. The large courtroom was packed with reporters, residents, and FBI representatives. In the defendant's row, Albert Crane sat quietly, his thin hands trembling slightly, his cloudy eyes still carrying a hint of defiance. In front of him, Essex County Prosecutor Martha Klein and Detective Claire Whitman, who had followed the case for half a year, sat in the front row. When the court declared the session open, Klein stood up, her voice resounding, "Your Honor, today we are not only trying a crime, but also ending 32 years of silence." The victim was a 5-year-old child, Jamie Whitmore, who was murdered and buried right behind the defendant's house. Science and time have exposed what he tried to hide. She projected onto the large screen a timeline of forensic evidence, a red fabric scrap, soil samples, a rusted knife, a notebook, a cassette tape, and DNA records. Images of the crime scene were recreated, using FBI-supported 3D technology, a small boy in a red coat being dragged through the fence, the sound of barking dogs echoing, followed by dim light in the dog kennel, the location where the body was found. Every detail was simulated based on real data, leaving the courtroom in stunned silence. Klein called forensic experts to testify one by one. Dr. Evelyn McCauley, the director of the Boston lab, presented Albert Crane's DNA was found on the victim's fabric scrap, on the knife, and in the soil samples around the body. The match is 99.97%, impossible to be coincidental. She pointed to a chart displaying the compared gene sequences. If there's any reasonable doubt, the probability of that is less than 1 in 1 billion. Next, the FBI's audio expert explained the DEC 92 inches cassette tape. The first voice matches Crane's sample perfectly. The second voice belongs to Raymond Cole, who died in 2009. The background sounds include dog barking, wind, and the characteristic echo of the Ashmere Road area. This is not a random recording, it's evidence capturing the crime. The prosecution continued with evidence from the 1992 notebook, zooming in on the page, that read 12/12, "Too cold. Didn't plan to, but it happened fast. He said bury deep, lime's enough." Klein read each word slowly. She said, "Is Raymond Cole. This entry matches exactly the time Jamie went missing." When the rusted knife was presented in court, the jury watched intently. The forensic report confirmed that the dried blood on the blade matched the victim's DNA. Klein closed her presentation with an argument. Each piece of evidence is strong on its own, but when placed together, they form an undeniable picture. Albert Crane killed Jamie Whitmore. It was the defense's turn, and Crane's appointed attorney, Mr. Robert Darnell, stepped forward. He tried to create doubt. "Your Honor, this case relies on evidence over 30 years old. DNA samples could be contaminated, the tape recording could be fabricated. The defendant is an elderly man with fading memory, possibly confused. He requested the exclusion of the samples due to lack of assured chain of custody." However, Prosecutor Klein rebutted immediately. She projected storage records with continuous signed certifications, chain of custody from 1992 to 2024. No evidence has been damaged. All was sealed and examined by 3 independent labs. She paused, looking directly at the jury. "We're not talking about human memory, we're talking about biological traces, which don't know how to lie." The defense tried to drill into the cassette tape, claiming, "Voice analysis technology has error margins." But when the FBI presented frequency comparison charts showing only a 0.02% deviation, Darnell was forced to fall silent. He shifted to a humanitarian angle. The defendant is 80 years old, gravely ill, no longer a danger to society. Klein responded right away. Jamie was only 5 when he buried him alive. Time doesn't lessen the guilt. Over the 5-day trial, the 12-member jury heard more than 10 witnesses and reviewed 11 key pieces of evidence. Every detail was cross-referenced with the original 1992 documents. The FBI recreated an area map, using a virtual model, Jamie's path, the fence location, the dog kennel, and the burial pit. The recreation even simulated the chemical reaction of lime with organic tissue, proving the burier had technical knowledge, matching Crane's mechanic profession. Whitman was called last. When the prosecutor asked why she pursued the case to the end, she replied, "Because no one else can speak for Jamie anymore." In her hand, a photo of the boy smiling in the snow silenced the courtroom. On the 6th day, both sides finished their arguments. In closing, the prosecution emphasized, "Not a single detail in this file raises reasonable doubt. From the voice, the handwriting, to the DNA, all point to one man." She pointed toward the defendant, Albert Crane. The judge instructed the jury to consider the 11 key pieces of evidence, including DNA samples on the knife and red fabric scrap, blood traces in the soil around the body, the notebook entry recording the time of the crime, the FD 92 inches cassette tape, receipt for lime and chemical purchases, testimony on ties to Raymond Cole, photos of the backyard and dog kennel, soil and chemical analysis results, FBI voice analysis report, indirect confession in interrogation, consistency in the evidence chain of custody. After 2 days of deliberation, the jury returned to the courtroom. The foreman stood, his voice clear, "We find the defendant Albert Crane guilty of first-degree murder." The courtroom fell silent. Whitman looked straight at Crane. He bowed his head, giving a faint wry smile. The judge banged the gavel for a temporary sentencing, moving to the penalty phase. Outside, the press ran headlines in unison. Cold Case 92-12-12, Justice after 32 years of waiting. That evening, Whitman left the courthouse in a light rain. In her hand was the photo of Jamie retrieved from the original file. She whispered softly, as if to the boy himself, "You've been given back your name, Jamie." Finally, justice has called the one who needed to hear it. On June 10, 2024, the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court courtroom was packed. The air was thick as the jury returned after 2 days of deliberation. The 12 members sat straight, faces tense. When the judge asked the final question, the foreman stood, holding the paper and reading each word clearly. "We, the jury, find the defendant Albert Crane guilty of first-degree murder, under Section 265, Clause 1 of the Massachusetts Criminal Code." A murmur spread through the courtroom, then fell silent. Crane sat motionless, hands clasped, eyes on the floor. Detective Claire Whitman stood in the back row, fists clenched. 32 years, a disappearance thought long forgotten, finally had closure. Judge Eleanor Briggs banged the gavel, declaring the trial moving to sentencing. Amid the whir of recording devices and press camera flashes, her voice rang out low and firm. "Albert Crane, you took the life of a 5-year-old child, deliberately disposed of, and concealed the crime for over 3 decades. Your actions were cruel, calculated, and show no sign of remorse. The court sentences you to life imprisonment without parole." No one in the room moved. A few Ipswich residents broke into tears. In the witness row, Whitman bowed her head, exhaling slowly. For her, the sentence was not just the end of a case, but an affirmation that justice, though late, still exists. After hearing it, Crane lifted his head, giving a raspy smile. Finally, peace. Officers immediately handcuffed him and led him out. As he passed Whitman, he muttered low, "You dug deep enough." She didn't respond, just watched him go through the heavy door to the holding cells below. That afternoon, Massachusetts State Police held a press conference at their Boston headquarters. The director announced the official closure of Cold Case 92-12-12, the disappearance of Jamie Whitmore. The statement read, Thanks to the collaboration of forensic units, the FBI, and state prosecutors, the case has been resolved after 32 years. This is a historic milestone in cold case investigations. Claire Whitman was honored for her exceptional contribution in reopening and solving the case. News spread quickly across the state. On the front page of the Boston Globe, the bold headline read, "Arrest shocks community. Cold case 9212 solved after 32 years." Below was a photo of the house at 29 Ashmere Road, cordoned with yellow tape, next to an image of Whitman leaving court with weary eyes. The article ended with the line, "In the silence of Ipswich town, justice has finally spoken." In Ipswich, residents gathered outside St. Mary's Church, where a 1993 memorial for Jamie had been held. They lit candles, placed flowers, and a photo of the boy smiling in the snow. A woman whispered, "We've waited too long for this day." The next day, Whitman returned to the Ashmere Road site one last time. The backyard had been leveled, a new fence erected in place of the old one. She stood silently for a long while, listening to the distant sea wind. Everything once buried here, crime, pain and even justice, had now surfaced. Before leaving, she taped a small note to the fence, handwritten simply, "Jamie Whitmore, 1987, 1992, found, never forgotten." That night, TV news replayed footage of the sentencing, interspersed with old archival clips of the disappearance. The anchor's voice intoned, 32 years, a long journey of faith and perseverance. Cold case 9212, closed, but forever remembered as a symbol of justice's power. And as the screen went dark, in the corner of the Whitmore yard, a gentle wind turned the old pages of time, where a case thought sunk into oblivion, finally ended with two words: the truth. 2 weeks after the trial, Detective Claire Whitman sat alone in her old office at the Massachusetts State Police Department. On the desk was the final file marked Cold Case 9212, Jamie Whitmore. She opened the cover and began writing the case summary report, closing a journey of over 30 years. The opening line she wrote, "Victim Jamie Whitmore, born 1987, missing December 12, 1992, perpetrator, Albert Crane, sentenced to life without parole, status, file complete, Cold Case 9212, closed." Whitman listed the entire investigation process, from body discovery, DNA analysis, cassette tape, diary, to the final testimony in court. Her conclusion line was brief: "Thanks to persistence and advances in forensic science, justice for Jamie Whitmore has been restored." When signing, she closed the file, looking around the room once filled with maps, photos, and investigation files. Now, only a thick binder remained, proof of a closed case. But for her, this journey was the start of a new legacy. Early July, the Massachusetts State Police announced Project Reopen, a program to review all missing persons files from the 1970s, 1990s. The Jamie Whitmore file was selected as a model case in cold case training, presented at the Boston Police Academy, as an example of the importance of evidence preservation and modern DNA technology. In the first lecture, Whitman was invited to share. She projected the photo of Jamie, the boy smiling in the snow. "This is not just a case," she said, "but a reminder that every file, no matter how old, still has a soul waiting for justice." The classroom fell silent, young investigators taking notes, eyes alight. The story of Jamie Whitmore quickly became iconic. The press hailed it as a turning point in statewide cold case work. The Massachusetts Attorney General signed an order establishing the DNA Archival and Forensics Center to digitize all cold case evidence. On the plaque outside the center, the inscription read, "Dedicated to Jamie Whitmore, 1987, 1992. His case proved that justice never sleeps." Whitman read that inscription in silence. She knew behind the honors were years of effort, hundreds of people who never stopped believing truth could be found, no matter how long buried. One late summer afternoon, she returned to the cold case storage in Salem, where it all began. Hundreds of metal cabinets stood in rows, each label a name, an unfinished story. The archivist handed her the key. Whitman walked to the 9212 row, gently placing the thick file into the slot, affixing a new label, closed, solved, May 2024. She stood still for a few seconds, hearing the iron door click shut, the sound echoing like the end of the past. Under the dim fluorescent lights, thousands of other files lay quiet, waiting their turn to be opened. Before leaving, she whispered softly, "Rest easy, Jamie, but justice won't sleep." The security camera at the end of the hall captured her silhouette walking away, the steel door slowly closing, white light casting on the dusty file labels. And there, in the cold space of silent files, the Jamie Whitmore case ended, leaving a legacy, the belief that justice, though late, can still be revived. Looking back at the Jamie Whitmore case-solving journey, in today's U.S. context, we see some very practical lessons. Technology, plus community discipline saves lives, but bias and tunnel vision can derail. In 1992, Ipswich police fixated on the white van and overlooked the neighbor's dog kennel. 32 years later, just a red fabric scrap, toy wheel, and lime-layered soil, properly preserved under chain of custody, plus mitochondrial DNA, and voice analysis changed everything. Lessons for us: 1. Invest in feasible family and neighborhood safety. Backyard motion lights, doorbell cameras, garden gate locks. When dogs bark unusually like Cooper, don't ignore. 2. In emergencies, call 911 immediately. Log timelines, preserve the scene. Don't clean the yard yourself, burn trash, wash clothes, because 30 years later, that fabric scrap could be the only truth. 3. Don't play internet detective. The Raymond Cole case shows collective speculation can skew investigations and cause harm. Instead, report tips anonymously to NC Mex Lex Namis. Respect the victim and family. 4. Communities should support budgets for cold case units, backlog testing, file digitization, like Project Reopen in the story. Every dollar here can restore a name to a person. 5. Teach kids age-appropriate U.S. cultural safety skills, from family passwords, to safe adults rules, to not going alone through dark backyards. Also build trust circles with neighbors, but verify, because a kind neighbor might hide secrets. Finally, remember, justice doesn't sleep. What we do today, preserving evidence, cooperating properly, persisting, is how we light the way for files still silent in steel cabinets. Thank you for joining us in following the journey to bring justice back to Jamie Whitmore, the case that slumbered for over 3 decades. Subscribe to the channel to continue with us in the next cold case stories, where the truth is still waiting to be found.